Okay, this is English Colonization Part 10. We're going to try to finish Massachusetts here, and there's something that's been a lot of heat generated over this for quite a while now. How do these people deal with dissent? That's spelled D-I-S-S-E-N-T, as you see on the screen there. The fact is that if you get enough people who are seriously interested in religion or politics or economics or a bunch of other things together, they're not all going to see eye to eye. In a situation like this, they thought it was important that they do see eye to eye. So how did they deal with it? The New England Puritans, for a long time, were accused of hypocrisy. And hypocrisy is when you hold other people to a higher standard than you hold yourself. Do as I say, not as I do, shall we say. Okay, and the reason for that was the idea, the assumption that they came to America seeking religious freedom, but then when they got here, they did not practice religious toleration. And in our minds, in our culture, religious freedom and religious toleration are pretty much synonymous. Okay? So I'm going to defend them, okay, just so we see both sides. What's up with this? Our concept of religious freedom has basically two parts, both embedded in the First Amendment of the Constitution. One is, as I mentioned, religious toleration, and that is that where the government is concerned, your religious beliefs are your business and not anybody else's, okay? And in the package is the way you choose to exercise your religion as long as you're not blocking traffic or hurting somebody. So that's one part of it. The other would be separation of church and state, that there should be no official role between the church and the state. All right, so we look at them and we don't see that. What's up with this? First thing here, is it really quite fair to judge people of one century in culture by the standards of another century in culture? That could have its shortcomings, wouldn't you think? The reality is that neither one of those concepts would have been approved by these Puritans. Okay, they fled England because the government was intolerant of their beliefs, but their problem was not the intolerance itself. Okay, and that's in the same package as close relationship between church and state. They didn't really have a problem with either one in principle. They just thought that the religion the government was foisting off on everybody was the wrong religion. Had they been in power, they wouldn't have had a single qualm about making everybody conform to their religious beliefs. So there you go. They did not have a concept of individual religious liberty. That's not what this is about. That would not have made any sense to them. The kind of religious liberty they're seeking is collective, or shall we say corporate religious freedom, the freedom of an entire population to move to the American wilderness and try to set up a whole community or commonwealth based specifically on Christian principles as they understood them. So that should open it up just a little bit. Let's say you have any kind of group of people, anytime, who are together pursuing some reasonably well-defined group objective. Let's say it's a sports team trying to win games or win a championship. And what if you have people in that group whose behavior is undercutting that? It's a sports team with people who don't really follow the coach's instructions. They don't stay on the training rules. They don't come to practice when they're supposed to. Would anybody say it's intolerant when they get kicked off the team? I don't think so. There wouldn't be a problem with that. Even though, is it intolerance? Well, yes, it is, but it's rational intolerance. Let's say you belong to a labor union. Let's say your union's out on strike. You get to work and all your other fellow union members are marching around in a circle holding little signs, change little slogans. You say, hi, guys, just walk on in and start doing your job. You'll be lucky if all they do is kick you out. So I think that's the way to look at it. They're not really thinking about individual religious freedom. That wouldn't have made sense. So separation of church and state, or the government seeing the maintenance of religious orthodoxy as a legitimate function of the state, only seemed like just common sense to them. Any government that, well, let me back it up a step, given the catastrophic eternal consequences of letting people teach false beliefs, a government that just lets just anybody preach just anything would be grotesquely off base. What's the word I was looking for? Um, they would be letting something go that could have terrible consequences. So the government maintaining that wasn't the problem. It was just they were maintaining the wrong one. And for this to make maybe a little bit more sense, I'm going to go out on a limb here. Have you ever noticed that math teachers are notoriously intolerant? You ever notice that? They got this idea that 2 and 2 equals 4 every single time, that a math problem has just one or a closed set of correct outcomes. They draw a distinction between correct and incorrect. Now, how long are you going to put up with that? I mean, aren't you a new generation with a new explanation? I mean, wait a minute, that was us. My point being, we don't have a problem with the rules of arithmetic. Okay, their problems have a right answer and a wrong answer. We don't have a problem with that. What if we lived in a culture where the basic religious beliefs and doctrines were assumed to be as clear-cut, cut and dried, knowable and provable as the basic rules of arithmetic? And that along with this, the consequences of straying off course on this, or believing false things, or letting somebody teach false things, could be catastrophic, as in you could go to hell. There's no pill for that. So in their world, teaching false doctrines, especially to the kids, that would make poisoning the water supply look minor. So it all made perfect sense to them, and the idea of as I say, letting just anybody teach just anything was not going to fly. Okay, whereas English Puritans were haggling over big, deep issues, American Puritans, it was more like specific applications of things. But they did drink one certain brand of Kool-Aid, shall we say, that is buying into the idea that the government can enforce just morality, moral regulations. And that has never worked, and it never will. For example, aren't you glad women don't gossip anymore? Yeah, right. Women who are known to be notorious gossips and who just couldn't seem to rein that in, they had a punishment for them. You'd have it was called the ducking stool. You've got a thing here with a long pole and a chair on the end, and they would strap the woman into the chair, and it's back next to the pond. They're going to dunk her in the pond a few times and see if that doesn't reform her procedures. Women or men both, for a long list of crimes, can be placed in the stocks. That's a wooden contraption where it's got a hole for your neck and a hole for your hands and a hole for your feet. You can't move. You're just stuck in there while people can come by and make fun of you and spit on you and throw eggs at you or whatever. And this is for things that wouldn't even be remotely crimes today. So just the fear of that would keep people in line, as if that would actually accomplish anything. There have been history textbook writers who would dig up the most absurdly extreme example they could find in the records and then run that up the flagpole as if it were typical. To wit, this was in a textbook one time. There was a case on record where a man had been sentenced to spend 3 days in the stocks for the crime of kissing his wife on the front porch rather than going discreetly behind closed doors. This is called public display of affection. And by the way, the man had just returned from a 3-year ocean voyage. So it looks like if he could wait 3 years, he could wait 2 minutes. Anyway, is that typical? Wouldn't think so. Okay. There were two high-profile cases that came up almost simultaneously in Boston very early. This is the mid 1630s, and the first one involved a man, popular Puritan minister named Roger Williams. Roger Williams, as I say, was a devout Puritan. He came over from England in 1631. He already had such a strong reputation for godliness that he was offered the pastorate of the Boston church, the main one, and he declined it on the grounds that it wasn't really pure enough for his tastes. Williams is a brilliant man, but while we're at it, he's the sort of person that people instinctively liked. People liked Roger Williams. And you might want to be careful about that. You're going to run into people you really like, and I'd caution you against just automatically believing everything they tell you just because you like them. Anyway, there are a couple of things Williams just wouldn't shut up about, and he got in trouble. None of the stuff had anything to do with religious doctrine, by the way. One thing was that he thought that the king should have paid the Indians for the land before he just up and granted it to the company. In fact, he was making a big to-do out of that. Went so far as to propose that the assembly, the general court, should send the king a message advising him of his error. Do kings make errors? Officially, no, they do not. So his thinking runs like this, okay? It's kind of a lawyer thinking away. And remember, the colony's not being run. I didn't tell you that, did I? This is a religious commonwealth. Wouldn't you think the preachers would be calling all the shots? You might, but they weren't. It was a rule almost from the beginning. I forgot to put this in, so I consider it put in now. Ministers were forbidden to hold public office. Not because they thought that they would exercise too much power. It's just that it would be that in the minds of the Puritans, the most important work a man could do in this world was to be a minister, to open the Word of God to his congregation. It would be so tempting to overburden these gifted men with the petty, unimportant details of civil government. So the best way to protect them from that is just to put them off limits. We cannot give them that job. Okay, so where was I? Williams thought that the Indians should have been paid for the land. Here's the problem with that. If you pay the Indians for the land, you are acknowledging that they own the land. Okay? Now, if the Indians own the land, then the king did not own the land, because two different entities cannot own the same thing at the same time. And if the king did not own the land, then he had no authority to grant the land to the Massachusetts Bay Company. And if you take it that far, then to suggest that paying the Indians for the land is to lay the axe to the root of the very legality of the colony and its government and all the land titles. You just can't have that. Anyway, they finally got Williams to basically hush up about that. But then there's another one that comes up, and that was the authority of the state to enact into civil law the Ten Commandments. And I'm not sure where I am. I'm patching two things together, so I'm going to stop this one here and come back in part 11.